Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining another session of the GSE UK Virtual Conference of 2023. Today with us, we've got Rob Scott from Rocket Software. He will be presenting on SDSF Hidden Treasures. This is session 9K. Now, in regards to questions, you can raise questions in the chat box, and I will be monitoring that and asking the questions to Rob throughout the presentation. But at the end of the presentation, I will enable and allow you to unmute yourselves and ask the questions to Rob. So, without any further delays, Rob, welcome and thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, hi, I'm Rob. I've been at Rocket for almost 20 years now. And one of my roles at Rocket is the architect and one of the developers for SDSF on behalf of IBM. Rocket have been developing and supporting SDSF since 2015-16 timeframe. So we've done a couple of full releases, 2.3, 2.4, 2.5, and obviously the new one that's coming out in September. And this presentation really is sort of inspired by my own ignorance. So when I've been a systems programmer for many years before I was a developer, and I've been using SDSF in the same old way for many, many years. And when we took over the development of the product, I was taken aback about how many things I didn't know how to do within inside the product. So this presentation is an attempt to share that knowledge around a little bit more, because there's some quite cool things that we can do, and we've got some new things as well that are in the product in 2.5. So here's a outline of the basic objectives of what I want to talk about. So it's quite a hodgepodge of things that you can do manipulating tables. There's some things that you can do when you're browsing a piece of output or logical output. There's some things around the operator command, / command, data set lists and how you manipulate those, and recs inside SDSF itself. So without further ado, everything that we can give you to help you manipulate the SDSF tables better in your ISPF or TSO session. So the basics, there's a set command that you can use to set various options at the user level, and most things are saved in the ISPF profile. And there's one very important one right at the beginning here, set display on or set display off. And if you have set display on, you will see the current values of prefix, owner, dest, and sysname overlaid on the screen above the column titles. And this can be really handy if for some reason the rows don't match what you expect them to match on the JES-Q panels like H and ST and O and things like that. If you're feeling that you don't like your screen real estate and you'd like to see SDSF squished to the barest minimum that you can see, you can type set action on. And what that's going to do, it's going to overlay the first portion of your screen with all the action characters that you can type and their description. So if you do that on something like the DA panel, I think we're left with about 8 lines of visible data. So we do have a short option. So you can do set action short or set action off once you come familiar with all the action characters. Set screen to change any colors or highlighting options that we have within the product. Set console with a name. So that's going to set your default EMCS console name if you're authorized to issue operator commands. And you can change the date formats for most dates within the product. There are certain dates that we still don't convert this way because we're given them here by the data that we collect in character format. So we can't do any sort of date manipulation because we don't know the time, we don't know the zone offset for those. But for most things we get back as like a store clock date, we can apply this date format. And you can change the separator character as well if you don't like the slash. Okay, so that's very, very basic stuff. Now, there's one thing that I want you guys to take away from this presentation, it's Fast Path Select. I was not aware of this until about 7-8 years ago. You can type the S character or select if you want to type the whole thing, and some sort of pattern using asterisks and percent signs, and that will re-invoke the panel that you're on and apply a temporary filter against the fixed field. Okay, the fixed field is typically the field on the furthest left-hand side of the screen that doesn't move when you do any sort of horizontal scroll. So a typical use case could be that you're on DA panel and you normally set your owner to your user ID or something like that, and you want to have a look, oh, well, I want to have a quick look at all the DBM1 address spaces. The example here, S space asterisk DBM1 will do a DA, ignoring your owner and prefix if you're authorized to change your owner and prefix, and temporarily show you all the address spaces on DA with that masking field. Okay, applied. So this is really, really handy for you to go and have a look, and PF3, and you come back to your nice, safe ring-fenced owner and prefix settings on DA. So there are some panels that accept a second parameter as well to filter on another column. A typical one example here is the job ID. So on ST, you can filter on job ID using Fast Path Select as well. That applies to all tabular panels that have a fixed field. Locate column. So quite often I've seen users of SDSF, we've got quite a lot of columns on some of our panels like DA and ST, it could be 30, 40, 50 columns, and they're looking for a specific column. And so they'll use PF10, PF11 to scroll horizontally, hunting for that instance of that column in the display. There's no need to do that. You just type L and then some part of the column name. Okay, so you don't have to fill the entire thing out, and then press enter. And what will happen is that the display will automatically locate that column and make it the first non-fixed field column on the display. So you see in the second screen down here, I'm doing the TGPCT column has been located and moved so that the screen is arranged around that, and that's in response to an L space TGPC command on the previous panel. Arrange. Okay, so in days of all of yore, the systems programmers would customize their ISF, PRM, accept palmlib member, and they would specify the order of the fields that you wanted to see on the SDSF panels, and they could move them around, and they could set up an alternate display as well. And they might even hide certain columns from certain users. As we've gone through various more modern releases, we realize that that's quite a labor-intensive process. And also it means that any columns the sysprogs forget to put in those field lists, maybe new columns that we add, we release, they don't surface within the displays of the product. So we now encourage people, if you do want to change the default order, to use the arrange command, which is saved in your own personal SPF profile. So there's a few things you can do here. You can arrange a column first, and that'll be first after the fixed field. Arrange it last, obviously. You can arrange one column before or after another, or a new thing that came in 2.5, maybe 2.4, I can't remember which, where you can hide a column. So we have this special logical column called dot end, and if you arrange your column after dot end, then it goes all the way to the right hand side of the screen, but beyond this dot end boundary, which means that we then don't show it. So it's a nice way of taking columns you're not interested in and move them completely off the screen. We do, for numerical columns, we do try and format the numbers to the width of the field that's on the panel, and we will do factoring, but we will do dividing by 1,000, by 1,000,000 to try and get the number into the screen displayed width. Otherwise, we might end up having to put things like asterisks and stuff like that in. If you want more precision, for numerical values, you can actually change the width of the column, and you just type in ARR, column name, and then a number. Okay, and that is then going to set that column width to that number. So you've got a full word number, you might want to set to 10, and you will see all of the digits that that could possibly contain. While experimenting with this, of course, you might screw things up. So the ARR or range default command will reset your column order back to the product supplied defaults. But we also do provide a pop-up in order for you to do this. So you can use ARR question mark, and you'll get a nice ISPF pop-up panel, and that will guide you through how you can move the columns around. You can do like line commands and shift columns around that way. But the example I'm giving here on screen is a native command that I'm typing on the AS display. AS is a display that shows all the address space storage details. So we added the private and private percentage columns in I think it was in 2.5. And what we do when we add new columns to a display, we always add them off to the far right-hand side of the screen in case anyone's got emulator macros or some sort of automation or batch scripting that depends on column sequence. So sometimes these columns don't get seen when you first kick off the product. But in this one in particular, I wanted to move the private percentage used column to the left-hand side of the screen, so I think it was quite interesting. So I'm typed in here ARR private% after fixed, and you'll see here that this new column has come along quite nicely and fitted in beside the fixed column. Okay, filter. This is another thing that a lot of people miss, is the ability to run filters on tables. So these filter criteria that you can type in, they are applied after your prefix owner dest and system processing has occurred. And they again are saved in your ISPF profile. And again, we have a pop-up that will be displayed if you do filter asterisk question mark. And the really cool thing with filters is you can have multiple filters acting on multiple columns with multiple values, but you can then toggle them on or off. Okay, so let's say I've got this complex filter of things I want to apply, and then I want to turn it off temporarily to something. So you can just type filter off, and it will turn off those filters so you see the full screen. And when you type in filter on, it remembers that you have that filter in the background and then reapply.
Please.
Okay, so within the filter command, we accept various operator values. So it's filter, column name, some sort of operator, maybe the default is equals. You don't have to specify the operator. If it's equal, you can leave it out, and some sort of value. So here's a quick example, simple case. So again, I'm using I want to look at the DBM1 address spaces. So on the DA screen, I'm typing filter job name asterisk DBM1. Okay? And then what you'll see there on the next screen is what that looks like. But if you look in the set display on area, you've got filters equals 1 there. Okay? And that's going to reflect the number of individual filter clauses that are currently being applied to this panel. We can have multiple. Okay, so it might go 4, 3, 4, 5. You can have multiple filters applying against the same panel. So there's an indicator there that you have a filter applied. If you want to do more complex things, you can use the filter pop-up. So type in filter question mark, and we will prompt you here for what you want to do. And you can now start doing more advanced things. You can have anding between columns and oring on values within the same column. So you see here that I'm expanding my desire to see DB2 by saying, well, show me any job name where it's DBM1 or MSTR or DIST or IRLM, or if it's in a workload, a WLM workload that starts with the characters DB2. Okay, so that could be my filter for this panel. And then this is what the panel looks like in the background. And here we see we have filters equals 5 because there are 5 active filters applied to this screen. Okay, before I go on to show the next slide, there is a couple of things I want to point out at this point. Okay, so filter and arrange are quite powerful, but there are a couple of things you need to consider, especially when you're using them on what we call the Q panels. So these are the JES Q panels like H and O and I and ST, those guys. Because there are performance considerations for certain types of column. So JES has the concept of information that can give back to you very, very fast. It's called the terse section of the data that comes back. And then if you drill down to less frequently required and less cached level of information, you actually have to do spool IO to go and get the value for that cell within that column. And the minute you start doing that, of course, the response time of what you're trying to do inside of SDSF will drastically increase if we've got to go and do spool IO for every single item of data. Okay? And so this drastically affects filter and arrange, because if you arrange a column and bring a slow field into your default view, that will slow down the display. Also, if you bring something like programmer name, okay, programmer is a very common one that trips people up because they put something in the program name, that they put a description of the job that's just run, and then they want to see that in their held output. So they'll arrange that column over to so it's there on the default screen, but unfortunately that's a slow field. So that means that when they type H all or H and they've got a large number of jobs, that means it's going to be spool IO for every single job to get that data back. So there's a cautionary effect there. And likewise, if you have a slow field in a filter, okay, that's going to have the same effect. Even if that column isn't on the screen, the fact that it's in a filter, okay, will then cause us to have to do the IO to get that spool data back. So just be aware of using arrange and filter too readily against those delayed fields. If you don't know what on these panels what a slow field is or what a delayed field is, if you type in the colh command on the command line, that is the cols help abbreviation. That will then show you a table of all of the columns that are valid for that screen, and in there will be a delayed yes value if that column is a slow column. And the same applies to sort as well. If your sort criteria is sorting on a slow field, again, it will increase the response time for these panels. Okay, so previously we've said that we hold a lot of columns on some of our screens. DA, AS, ST, they've got like upwards of 30 or 40 columns. And so you might want to be scrolling horizontally to try and find the data that you're after. But there is a new facility, I think this came in 2.4, called show. So it's a slash action character. And you put it against the row on an SDSF table. So this isn't the slash you put in the command line to do an operator command. This is a slash you put against a row. And what that does, it takes all the data that was horizontally shown on that row, and it presents it to you in a scrollable iScript pop-up where it's presented vertically. Okay, so you can just scroll up and down the list of values here, and we can also take out all null values as well. So if there's if the tick mark is not present there for all values, then we just show the columns that actually have data inside your blanks and zeros. Okay. So that's what we think is a useful addition to the functionality. Block and repeat. Most people know that you can do block actions with a double slash on the row to do an action against all the rows in between. And most people know that you can do question marks, repeat the last action that you type. But you can also do this for overtypes as well. So in this trivial example here, I've overtyped the priority for some weird reason on this job here, and I want to apply it to the next 5 rows as well. So I'll do a double slash in the first guy, type 100 on the overtype of the field, and then I just have to do a double slash on the last guy, and that will then take that number and apply it to every single row in between. So I don't have to keep on typing 100 on every single overtype field. Okay. Overtyping extensions. So there are some fields that we have that have more than one, have a group of values that are behind them. System affinity is a good example here, and I use it in the screenshots. So this is system affinity column on ST, and it can have more than one sysname in it. Okay, I mean, if you want to see what those values are, or in fact change them, you can just put a plus sign in that field and nothing else. And what will happen there is you'll see this overtype extension panel pop up, and then you can enter more values to apply to that change that you want to apply to the row, or you can remove data by blanking it out. Okay, so there's a plus sign. We do use plus sign elsewhere, and I'll show you a little bit. Snapshot is another facility that I was unaware of until we had the product of Rocket. So this will take any SDSF table and convert it into, take all the results and convert it into some sort of logical view browse operation. So the default is to take it into an SDSF browse session. So it turns it into something like SysApp. But you can also put it into various ISPF display functions as well: edit, view, and browse. But you could also override the default, which is SDSF browse, with a set snap command. So set snap SE, and then that means every time I do a snap after that, it's going to take me into ISPF edit. Now, it's not edit of a data set, it's edit of the data, of the logical data. So it's actually edif, if you're familiar with ISPF services. So all of the editing facilities are available to you. So you can run edit macros against it. You can copy and delete lines and things like that, and then maybe type a create to save it to a data set. So it gives you lots of flexibility to manipulate the table data using ISPF tooling. Point and shoot. You might have gathered earlier, we're quite lazy typists here in SDSF HQ. So we do like point and shoot, and we like single character command names. So there's 3 places where you can do point and shoot. First one is the MP field, the column where you do an action against a row. So if you do a point and shoot there without typing anything, we can, if you want, invoke a browse session on the row that you're talking about. So maybe you just do a point and shoot an MP on a piece of output, and it goes into browse. And you can do via, remember the set command from earlier, there's a set browse command where you can say what you want to do in that circumstance. It's none, or S, or SE, SV, and SB. Okay. Certain panels have point and shoot actions defined for the fixed field. Okay. So a good example of this is on DA or ST. Some of the Q panels, the job name is sensitive to point and shoot. And if you do a point and shoot on that job name, it's equivalent to typing question mark beside the job name. So you get what we call the JDS panel, or the job data set panel. Okay, we see all the individual DDs for that job, and then you go and browse the output. If you don't like this, there is a setting, another set command, set PAS for point and shoot on and off, and that will remove this functionality. Previously, it was called set FFPS, which is, I think, the world's worst SDSF command. Awful thing. So we produced an alias so people can remember it. And the other place we can do point and shoot, if you're a ZOS 2.5, is on memory address fields. So we do have this memory browse capability in 2.5, and some of the panels will show green underlined addresses. And so if you position your cursor on that address, you'll be taken into memory browse. Good example of that be something like the LPD panel that shows the link pack area, and you can go and browse a LPA module if you want to. But other panels might have a job name, ASID, and sysname associated with them. And if the code discovers that the row has that information in it, it will inherit the ASID and the sysname from that row. So if we're looking at, there's a new panel in 2.5 called the AD panel, which is for address-based diagnostics. Just shows you all the job names and ASIDs and all the control blocks that a systems programmer or developer might want to be interested in, like the ASCB and things like that. So you can then just do a point and shoot on that ASCB, and that will inherit the ASID and the sysname from that row and take you directly to do a memory browse on that control block. So that's pretty cool. Okay, so that's the end of the table stuff. So I am going to go on to browse next. So is there any questions so far, or should I just continue? Quite happy to answer any questions on the table manipulation.
No questions thus far on the chat box.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so some hidden treasures in browsers. It's not a huge section. This is just a few things. SDSF browse, we do support 4 types of browse, which is the native SDSF browse and the ISPF variants, browse, edit, and view. And again, here you can set the default that you use the set browse command. But if you're using SDSF browse, then there's some other little things you can do inside the product. And one of the handiest things here is the next and previous primary commands to skip to the next logical sysout dataset. Okay, so as you're probably aware, you have a job and it runs, batch job runs. You'll get at least 3 system datasets at the top of your job, JES message log and things like that. And then you get all the individual DDs that were written to by the various job steps. Okay? So if you just select a job with an S, you'll be taken into an SDSF browse session. And that actually is a logical concatenation of all those sysout datasets. It's the way we do it internally, is we have to go out and allocate each individual JES dataset and create a concatenation of datasets. So when you initially go in with S, you're at the top of that concatenation. So doing next and previous allows us to skip to the start of the next or previous logical dataset. It's a really nice way of skipping through things that you're not interested in. And you can give us a relative dataset number as a parameter to the next and previous as well. So if you do something like N3, that would skip the 3 datasets and position you on the 4th. We could also get smart. When you're coming in from DA or ST, you could type in S3, and that takes you into SDSF browse, and then immediately skips you 3 datasets to position on the 4th. And the 4th dataset tends to be the first application DD. Okay, so you got your 3 system datasets at the top, and the 4th one tends to be the first real piece of data that you care about. But this, as I said, only applies if you're using the native SDSF browse facilities. Here's an example here. So I'm in my held output over here, and I've done an N3, and then that takes me directly to this application sysout. Slash extension. So now we're going to talk about operator commands and what you can do with the slash.
Rob, sorry, there's a question here.
Sure.
Is it possible to do ASCII, browse, view, or edit?
ASCII, view, or edit? That is a good question. Okay, so we do have ASCII for memory browse. On sysout browsing, I don't know. It would probably be done via ISPF if we were to do anything. I'd have to look to see if there's an option in ISPF to say treat this data as ASCII. I'll take a look at that. Can you note down the email address of that person who asked the question, and I'll take a look. It's a very good question. I've never thought of it myself, But yeah, ASCII for browse. I've made a note of that myself. Okay, I'll continue. So slash extensions. Okay, so slash. If you enter slash with no text, you will drive a ISPF pop-up, and you will get the ability to enter more than our standard width of about 48 characters on the panel, and you'll get a like TSO option 6 style history of your recently issued operator commands, and you can get those back to the command line using a cursor select. Another handy thing with the slash pop-up is if you have to, for whatever reason, and you must issue a mixed case operator command. If you do it on a normal SDSF panel with just the slash command and immediately type it, it's going to be folded to uppercase. So if you use the slash pop-up, we don't fold to uppercase. So that's a good way for you to issue that operator command. Recent enhancements on 2.5. If you're running in a larger screen, and most people do tend to run with a larger screen. Now I tend to run 62 by 160, and you do a slash pop-up. We have a new panel that we show you that has a single command line entry of 126 characters, which is the maximum that you can throw at the MVS service to issue an operator command. So you can manipulate long operator commands much easier within a single input field than having to skip on multiple input fields. So that was a recent enhancement. The other thing that might be quite handy for you is you're on an SDSF panel and you're typing away, and suddenly you're beginning to panic because you can see you're getting close to the end of the input field and you're running out of room, and you really don't want to have to go and retype what you've already typed. You can just end your thing with a plus immediately. You just type plus, and what that's going to do is it'll take you to the slash pop-up, but it will inherit all the data that you typed before the plus and prime it on that panel for you. Okay, so this is what the system command extension pop-up looks like. So as I said before, we enter the slash with no command text, you get the last command primed in the panel, and you get some history in the field down below here. So you can bring back to the command line with an enter. Again, this is another example here. I'm running out of room on my command here. I've got some product that's what I'm going to put some sort of long text to, and even inside of quotes, it'll still work. So I've got this plus here, and then that will prime what I was typing into this panel and allow me to finish the rest. And you notice here I'm running in a large geometry screen. So this nice long command line here to enter the full 126 characters if I want to. Okay. We do have slash command groups. This can get a little bit complex, but you can associate commands with a group, and you can give them a comment for documentation purposes, and then you can recall and list commands based on group patterns, and then you can even delete commands from groups using PF keys on the pop-up panels that are displayed. So here's an example here where I have a group of SDSF commands and all the sort of modified commands perhaps that I need to issue on a regular basis, and I can assign them to a group. Sorry, I can assign them to a group. And then as you see, I've expanded the details. You can show here that I've got some sort of comment beside each of the commands to document what they do. Okay, so searching dataset lists. This is a recent-ish thing that we've added to the product since 2.3. So we have some panels now in SDSF that show datasets. Interesting data sets. So APF list, link list, LPA, the logical partner concatenation, the JES2 proclip data sets, and more interesting as well is the JDD command, which is the allocated data sets to an individual job. Okay, so it's an action on DA and other panels. You can say, well, what data sets, what DDs has that job allocated. So once you have this sort of SDSF panel that's showing these data sets, there is a primary command you can use, srch, and what that will do, it will list all of the PDSs that it can find within that data set list using a member name pattern that you specify as the first parameter. And you can use asterisk and percent masking characters on the member name. And then you've got some options onto how you want to display the results. The default will just show you every single data set and whether or not it found the member within that data set. But you can actually say, well, only show me the data sets where there was a match, or maybe you want to see the data sets where there wasn't a match. So there's an F for found and an NF for not found, or all is the default. So what does that look like? So this, I use a real example here. So there's this user ID, and I want to find out where his ISR Act PR members come from. Okay, so I've done a JDD against this guy on BA. It's taken me to the job DD names display. I've typed in my search command, and that's then given me a list of data sets where the member was found. You can see down here we have a status of found. We have the data set name, we have the member name mask. So this means what I can do now, I can type in SB beside that data set name. And what that's going to do under the covers, it's going to invoke ISPF browse and apply the masking, the mask that we used against that member list. So that's then only going to show me the members that were matching in that data set. And so you can use SB here. You can use SV for view and SE as well if you want to go and do an edit. We do, I will say here, we do recover from abends, authorization failures, and non-PDS data sets comfortably within this path. So you don't need to worry about that. You don't need to have to filter out non-PDS data sets. We will do that for you. Okay, the last subject that I want to go through just quickly is running recs inside of SDSF. So there is, everyone knows that there's a recs interface to SDSF where you can write recs and outside of invoking the product, and it can do SDSF things, return data, extend variables, and so forth. But this is more about running recs inside the product. Okay, so if you use the percent action character, you will drive a pop-up panel that asks for a recs exec name and any optional arguments you want to give it. Or you can type in percent and then immediately the recs exec name, and you'll drive it immediately there. If you're doing that, you might need to increase the width of MP, and you can use the arrange command in order to do that. There's a special field on the arrange pop-up says how wide you want MP to be, and you can do like 10, 12 characters. Or you can actually just type plus NN in the MP field, and that will set the MP width to that character as well, to enable you to type in this recs exec that you want to do. So the exec then that is invoked gets passed arguments in the following format. You get the current panel that you're from, you get the primary panel, which might be a parent panel, you get a row token, and we'll talk about row tokens in a little bit. You get primary command, and you get a bracket, and then you get any user arguments that were passed as well. So at that point, you don't have the data for the row. Okay? All you know is that you've been invoked from this panel, and you've been passed maybe some arguments, and yeah, that's all the information that you have when you're given this thing called a row token. So the row token is there for basically to allow you to pass back to another SDSF service to say, go and get me the data for this row, so I can then take actions against that. So a good example of how you would do something like this, and I will get onto the row token a little bit later as well with this last function. So first of all, inside your recs that we called, you can use an ISF query function, and this is just a load module that exists in our SISF load, and with no arguments, it just gives a return code to determine if this exec was invoked under SDSF. So you might have a case where you've written this recs exec, and you can run it under SDSF, or maybe you can run it outside of SDSF. You need to take a different logic path, or maybe it's not valid if it's run outside of SDSF. So an example here of how you might code something like that. If you pass it a parameter of init, then it brings you back the environment variables that are in effect, things like the prefix and the owner and the dest and things like that. So you can interrogate some of the saved environment variables there. But this getting back of the row token values, we have an address SDSF ISF get function, and that allows you to go and get the values for the row that your exec has been issued against. Okay, so the address SDSF ISF get, the primary command, which you are passed as part of the arguments. Go back here, we're passed the primary panel as the second parameter. Sorry, the primary command, sorry, as the false parameter. And then the token, and then you give it the row token. After you make that call, you will have all of that row's values in Rex variables. And then you can make decisions against them. If you're in SDSF and you sort of think, oh, I want to start writing some SDSF Rex code, there's an rgen command that you can issue. And it generates starter exec, Rex exec source code that you can modify. Okay? And by default, it's pretty cool this. It generates everything you need to navigate to the panel that you're currently on. So basically, it can tell where you are inside the product, and then it will roll out all the SDSF Rex calls you will need to make in order to see exactly what you're looking at the time. If that's not good enough for you, you can type in rgenx, and that will give you a pop-up, and we have some canned examples of Rex execs to do various things within the product, like reads and outputs, process the SD panel, process things like that. And then you just select the example and modify as required. So what's happened there under the covers, the exec is generated to an ISPF temporary data set. So you can have a look at it, you can chat, you can look at the comments, you can turn certain comments into data lines if you want to use the ISPF MD command. But then obviously, you need to copy that to some sort of permanent data set before you end out of it. Otherwise, you're going to lose everything that you do. So it just gives you a starter set, and copy it out, and then you go away and test it and revise as required. Inside the product, we do have help for the Rex component. There's a Rex H command, Rex help command that you can issue inside the product. There's the col H or cols help command, and that's going to show you the internal column names that you're going to need if you're going to write Rex execs in SDSF. We also have a section within the SDSF user guide. There's a chapter called Using SDSF with the Rex Programming Language. And if you can't bear to read stuff and you just want to have a look at some slides, I gave a share prep presentation 4 or 5 years ago. Share session 24671, learn to use SDSF Rex. So I got some slides together and some very, very simple examples of using SDSF. Okay, that's the end. 40 minutes, I thought, 5 minutes or so. I'm happy to take any other questions from anyone there. If you want to unmute yourself and ask me a question, I don't mind. I might not be able to answer it, in which case I'll take your email address and get back to you. Don't be shy. Any questions in the chat at all? Great.
Yes, there's a question in the chat saying if the presentation will be available to download. Yes, it will be available to download from the GSC's conference website. I'm not sure if you've already uploaded it, Rob.
I have uploaded it, yeah. And what I'll do, there'll be a version, an IBM version of this as well, with the GSC stuff, trimmed head and tail. And we have a GitHub repo for all the SDSF presentation. So it'll go to there in the next couple of days as well.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions, either through the chat, or you can unmute yourselves and ask the questions directly to Rob? Well, there's a lot of compliments, Rob, in the meeting chat.
I hope it's useful.
Yes. Well, this has been, and I think it's the general opinion, this was a great session, Rob. There's a question here. Is there any setup required to get RGen X to work? It depends when I try it.
It does require you to have the ISPF objects correctly in your concatenation. So it'll use skeletons and tables. So you've got to make sure you've got your slib and your tlib set up correctly.
Okay, any other questions from anyone? Oh, I guess that's a no. Rob, thank you very much once again.
Okay, it's been a pleasure.
Perfect. Guys, don't forget to leave feedback on session 9K, and I hope to see you tomorrow. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.